Hey, everybody, you're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in, or in this case, stream in. And this is our second episode this week. Earlier in the week on Tuesday, Steve and myself were joined by Mike Lovins of the Real Gay Movie Show and our friend Craig Lance from the show that Caleb is also a part of, Southern Fried Geekery. And we had a Star Wars specific episode, and that was a lot of fun. We got to do that a little more often with the I almost wanted to say almost went back to that Empire incels. I was going to say, like, I don't know. I'm out. But it was a good time. But we're going to have a good time tonight because we have a very special guest with us. Please welcome for the first time to the show, David Hazan. David, how you doing there from down under? We literally can say this. This is our first.
Sydney, Australia. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, we're very happy to have you.
I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. Always wanted to say that.
And you were also like the best corrector of information. You're kind of like the fact checker for us sometimes.
Look, I always assumed that all of this information was completely useless, but you guys have validated me in a way that I'd never thought possible.
All right,
we're here to mess up for you.
Okay, well, to give a little bit of a bio here, David is a writer and editor based, as he said, in Sydney, and he's the writer of an upcoming series, Nottingham, and that is from Mad Cave Studios. And David was actually the winner of a talent search in 2019 from Mad Cave. He has a penchant for queer storytelling and formalism in comics, which shines through in some of his short comics work, some of which is self-published and some of which is to be published in anthologies from publishers in the upcoming year. We're really looking forward to hearing about Nottingham and also some of those other projects that you mentioned. So when we have a guest on the show, we ask. There's always one question that starts the proceeding off, and that is, how did you initially get into comics?
This is I feel like my personal story is like sort of out there compared to everyone else in that I have been reading comics like in any serious capacity for about 2 and a bit years.
Mm-hmm.
Basically just after I started reading comics, I entered that talent search and it all kind of went from there. But two colleagues of mine kind of got really tired of my incessant talking about TV and movies and shoved a copy of Batwoman Elegy in my hands. And ever since then, I sort of kind of like spiraled from like my obsession with that into the greater world of comics. But I guess I've always been like into comics related media. It's just and not to like blame my parents on stream for this, but there's definitely an element of like that childhood thing where comics were for kids and books were for adults, and that kind of, it took me, until the age of like 24 to break out of that. So yeah.
Okay, and again, we had mentioned the main reason that you're on here is to promote Nottingham. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch, Reader's Digest version of what Nottingham is about?
Okay, so basically what we've done is we've taken the Robin Hood legend and turned it on its head. We took the Sheriff of Nottingham and made him the protagonist in what is effectively a part crime noir, part police procedural, where he hunts a serial killer who's been targeting tax collectors in medieval England.
Okay, well, let's do the round robin here, and I'll always start as I do with my lucky charm, and that's Steve. So, Steve, why don't you throw over a question or two over to David?
Well, definitely. Thank you. So I really love this first issue. I think it was just so much fun to read. But basic question: why Robin Hood? And then the second part: why Robin Hood in basically in the same medieval period that it originally was reported to take place?
So basically, when I won the talent search, Mad Cave asked me to pitch a noir, and I kind of wanted to depart in a huge extent from everything that was already in the market. And I figured the best way to do that was to set it in a time period which people don't really consider for a traditional noir. And I only had 5 issues to do the thing, so I figured that if I came into it with an established cast of characters, I could shortcut a lot of the kind of background storytelling and world building. And then at the same time, I could also surprise people with different takes and kind of let their expectations lead them down paths that may not be the right ones.
That actually is such a great reason for it, because as you said, it's a very noir story. It's a very almost like, I don't want to say a traditional cop, like a gritty cop drama, but it's taking place in the 12th century, and you don't really expect to have the same I don't know, the same feel of something that could very well take place in the 20th century, the 21st century, but completely like 900 years ago. It's really fascinating how well the tropes that you would see in a noir, like a modern noir crime thriller, really work in a medieval setting. And like you said, having the characters already be established in a type of expectation that people might have for them based on all the previous media that they may have seen, the stories, the movies, the Disney cartoon. It really does a wonderful way. It does a wonderful thing of sort of like forcing you to reassess what you know about these characters in this completely new context. So, but I loved it. And actually, kind of going to that, the character of Ev, the sheriff of Nottingham, just basically a gritty police detective, essentially here. He's somewhat sympathetic, a little bit. Not really. I mean, he's still like a gruff, mean cop. But what kind of drew you to this character, or to this kind of take on the character of the Sheriff of Nottingham? Because we all know him as just a bad guy, but he is technically the law as well.
Yeah, I think part of it is that what attracts me to noir as a genre is characters who are kind of stuck in their cycles, and like their inability to kind of escape from those cycles. And for me, for the sheriff, he's very much trapped in between all of the social forces at play, and he's got one foot in both camps, in that he is a commoner, but he also has the kinds of responsibilities that have elevated him to a different social status. And so he's sort of trapped between the upper class and the lower class, and they're clearly at war in well, all the time, but in Nottingham more so. But I think also going back to what you said about the setting, I think there's something. I found a real parallel between like the birth of the noir genre, which effectively came out of post World War II anxiety and people bringing the horrors of war back home with them, and what we could do with that, drawing a parallel to the Crusades. And I think bits and pieces of that come out as the story evolves as well.
That is a good point. That sort of, not even post-war. It's like the war is still ongoing. The Crusades are still ongoing at this time, and you have that, that sort of ongoing sense of unease and tension, and there's something happening over there, but it's affecting us here, just economically and socially and emotionally, and that is very cool. There's so many great things about this to like, but kind of going away from the plot of the story and from Nottingham as a whole, going more towards your inspiration in comic storytelling, because you're relatively new to the comics genre.
Mhm.
What sort of tradition of comic storytelling have you found yourself gravitating more towards? Are you taking bits and pieces of inspiration from a more UK Euro style of storytelling, or more North American style of storytelling, or trying to look at what Australia has as well, sort of historically, for comics, and make it your own?
I think so. The people who a lot of the people who I follow in comics, and I've sort of been pretty verbose about this in the comments on the odd occasion, are people who are inspired by some of the European stuff, but also it's like the stuff that's been brought over to the US and commercialized. So like I would class myself as like the world's biggest Tom King fan. And then he's, of course, clearly the world's biggest Alan Moore fan. But the thing that I like about the both of them is the way they approach a page, and it's very much comics are purely comics in a way that I see a lot of books which are ostensibly great and like enjoyable, but there's nothing necessarily about them that makes them so quintessentially comics that you couldn't do them any other way. And those are the kind of things that inspire me, and you'll see little flashes of like that kind of thing in the book, but obviously it has to be commercial and it has to follow a story, so we don't spend the entire time in a 9-panel grid. So.
We have a quick comment here from Matt Broussard. Brian, I think, yeah. The explanation of the origin of noir, the convention of the characters trapped in behavior cycles, is startlingly sharp. And I mean, your explanation of that was definitely dead on. And I think in this book, for the people who are watching, that we recommend this book to for you to read, it really does come through very strongly in the first issue. And I can't wait to read the other issues, but I don't want to bogart all the time for asking questions. So, oh, they're over here this way. Up,
so
down,
Steve took all the good questions. No, I'm just kidding. I really got a bit of a Crazy from Warren Ellis vibe in some of the stuff that I read of Nottingham. I also reminded me, you said procedural. I was getting like that procedural, which I think of Chew, and I think procedural just because it's, they tried to marry these very weird, different, procedural with fantasy, I guess, in certain way. But yeah, there's other great examples. So, again, Steve did take several of my starting points, and I was like, God, well, we think so much alike. What was it like working, though? Your team of Shane Connery, Volk, who on art, and Luca Romano. I saw on YouTube there was a process video. Actually, I think there's like a process video for each of them, right?
Yeah, each of them has a process video. Shane's got him drawing a pinup, and there's one of Luca coloring a page in issue 1.
What was it like? Because again, first, this was your first full collaborative. What was it like coordinating, figuring that out, learning how each other's styles were? Did you end up kind of adapting your script to fit the artist and the colors? I mean, how did that all fit together?
So Luca came on much later. While like we had 3 odd issues done before before the colors were kind of considered. I have kind of the advantage of this being a work for hire thing. So Mad Cave and having an editor and not having to self-direct this was like a huge benefit for me. With having a day job. But I think I like from the very get-go, when I saw the designs that Shane sent back, I was like, okay, so this person has taken the thing that it was in my head and made it better.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was like super impressed. I didn't know what to, because I'd seen like a few of his pages, but I didn't really know what to expect. But the thing that really sort of inspired me then when going back to the writing was the fact that kind of like the faces of the characters just embody their inner turmoil. And that to me was like, okay, this person A, knows what I was thinking, B, does it better than the way I thought about it. So from there, we just we vibed pretty well. I don't think we really, had a whole lot of road bumps, and that was very much thanks to our brilliant editor, Brian Hawkins. And also we had on the first couple of issues, Chris Fernandez, who is now publisher at Mad Cave Studios. So props to them. And then Luca came on, and we just kind of like saw like the pages just go into color, and it was like it's just, you just get that glee when you see the thing that you had in your head come to life. So I couldn't be more happy with this collaboration, and I'm definitely very proud of what we've achieved.
Yeah, it's really good. We've gotten a chance to look at the first issue, and I love how it all fits together. I think the tone is surprising to me because, I mean, as Steve alluded to, if you're familiar with any of the stories of Robin Hood, like this is not that. This is a far different take that I think is going to be commercially viable and interesting. And we're not going to talk about some of the misdirects and spoils that you alluded to, because there is some of that, and I was shocked because honestly, I mean, the one thing I will say, like the first page or two, you get this grisly murder shown here, and I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute, is this in a different time? Is this from this different angle where suddenly like the good guys are the state, the Little John, or the not Little John, but the King John, and is this like a subverted story completely? And there's even like allusions to like, or is it clean up the greed and immorality, and then of course steal from the rich, give to the poor, but then where is it, cleansing the corrupt from the land, and there was something about fornicators, and I was like, wait a minute, where is this going? So I love that. I love that you again like kind of surprise people who might be expecting something else. The mask, the very iconic sort of look of the Merry Men, where did that come from? How did you decide, or was that Volk? Where did that come from?
So like I had kind of an idea of what I definitely, it came from like me thinking about how do I make the idea of the Merry Men really creepy. And so I thought, well, we'll just give them really creepy smiles. And it kind of evolved from there. I was like, well, this is a story ostensibly about classism. Like it has to reference the Guy Fawkes mask in some way. But then I had to look at what actual 12th century masks looked like. And I kind of just threw all of those ideas at Shane, and he gave me this. And I think it was like one of the first things that came back, and I was like, okay, we're doing it,
Sorry, that's so cool. When I love the synergy of comics, because so you're a writer, you've done other work, we alluded to, but I mean, have you written for other medium, or is this really like
I mean, I'm one of those people who has like, you know, a million unreleased short stories and half-finished novels just sitting in. Like I have a degree in writing. Um, I spent like a good 4 years as a legal writer and editor. So writing is, something that I've always done. But this is definitely my first foray into like real published fiction.
Wow. I mean, because it's a very well told, mature story. And I love the synergy, like I was talking about with comics, because you really do play off the artist in this case would be able to play off what you put down, and sort of like a musician jamming with another musician, improvising on each other's stuff. You really do get this synergy going, and this more than the sum of its parts that comes through. So kudos to you. I really thought this was fun. I mean, dark, certainly dark. I don't want to undersell this. This is not your all ages friendly Robin Hood story. But I really enjoyed it. So I don't want to, again, there's got to be more material. I don't want to take all of it. Bill, what passing it back to you.
Let me unmute first. So one thing I have to say, David, I'm going to echo what these guys have said. I really thought it was a really, really well done issue. And I, again, don't want to spoil too many things, but I thought in terms of the noir, and like while I'm reading this, I'm like thinking, like, what in hell is the 1300s equivalent of the Law and Order? Just within like 4 or 5 pages, I was getting that vibe. And again, there's a, there is there's a bit of a tonal shift very early on, as Brian alluded to, and that's perfect for when you want to give readers that, all right, where the hell are we going? Uncomfortable feeling, that right at the offset. And not to spoil too many things, but there were other things I really appreciated. One character that is almost always portrayed as a damsel in distress is so not the case in this one. But again, let people read what's in front of them when they get it. One thing I did want to ask, though, and especially I felt this with, there was a noir trope that was kind of hidden in terms of how we see the first crime scene, and just feeding into that. What were some of your noir influences? Whether they be films or novels. Was there anything that informed you before you started writing this? Since it sounded like the company Mad Cave did want a noir related pitch.
I think the answer to this question is I watch an insane amount of television, more than any sane human should watch. And I think this is kind of where the influence of my story structuring comes from, and it works perfectly for a 5-issue miniseries, because you can take the 5-act structure instead of 3 acts. And but yeah, I watch an insane amount of television, and a lot of television is crime procedurals. So but I don't think I can point to a single thing and go, this is it. Like I think there's been a sort of a recent renaissance of the kind of the quirky British detective meets the like kind of by the books American detective. And I think that there's a bunch of shows that have been like that, and I've just kind of taken all of that in.
And I just also want to follow up on something that Steve had said earlier. One of the most inventive things I thought about this issue was that you have a character who is almost always portrayed as an antagonist, as effectively the protagonist. And I was wondering if there were any particular challenges from a writing perspective that you encountered once you made that decision.
Not that I can point to. I think it's one of those things that actually happens in comics an awful lot, by virtue of the fact that people want to know, like, either how this villain became a villain, or they want to know what they're doing when they're not fighting the hero. I guess the one book that kind of tweaked me onto that in a way that I really enjoyed was Bendis on the it was an infamous Iron Man, I want to say.
That was Doom centric.
That was Doom
Yeah.
as Iron Man when Tony Stark died at some point. There was something like thoroughly enjoyable about watching this person who has he has no moral compunctions, and like him trying to figure out how to do the right thing.
And one other thing I have to say, and again, I'm so trying not to spoil stuff, but one thing that I thought was also a very strong testimony to your writing was that, again, you're part of a team, and very often when we do have noir-inspired comic series, it's very heavy on grays, very heavy on blood reds, if not outright black and white. And there's a very different color scheme that's in play here. And I just want to say I thought that was a very strong testimony to your strength as a writer, in that we had that vibe despite effectively a palette that may in some ways go against the grain of what you expect.
Yeah, I think very early on that decision was made to make it make that visual reference back to the original tale, but still subvert it. And I think part of that might be my writing, but a lot of it is the lines themselves. Because there's no better way to make something oppressively bleak than by giving people faces that kind of have so many lines that they're almost like crinkled rather than creased.
Okay, I've got that baton. I'm gaining it over back to Steve. Steve, what else do you have for David?
Well, let me take myself off mute there. It's funny that you talked about sort of like the lines and the faces. I think that and I do have to compliment Volk here, because the art really is gorgeous, and it fits the writing so well, I think. I think the art and your words really do complement each other very much, and giving the feel of a gritty crime drama, and yet also it's a period piece, so you do get sort of that design, like the clothing choices, the hairstyles, and just sort of what you might expect in kind of a dirty medieval time in English history. But I really like how you touched on a little bit earlier. You were talking about the class, the issue of class here. So this, you have the sheriff that's kind of like stuck in the middle, as a commoner, but with authority, that I think the upper class may not be used to, and the lower class resents. And so I think that's really an interesting perspective if you look at it from class. And, obviously you've got certain characters, and I know, one of Bill's favorite characters here, is kind of in that interesting middle ground as well, because of wealth not being there anymore, but status still being there. So wealth and status and class and all that playing. Do you think for future projects, and we can start talking about future projects that you have coming up as well, is that something that you'd be interested in exploring more in different time periods and with different types of settings and plots, but still kind of going back to like the issue of class and status and wealth? And
yeah, I mean, I think it's got a lot of kind of that one overarching thing has got a lot of like smaller sub issues in there that definitely are going to come through. in other things that I have planned and am working on that I cannot talk about.
Yeah. That's okay.
But I think for me, I wanted to. So I've had people point out that there's this sort of it evokes the the current political climate to them, and what I've tried to do, I think, is take that big ideological clash and kind of stuff it into characters so that you have kind of a face to kind of ascribe the clash of ideas to. For instance, we see on the first few pages somebody who's been clearly radicalized, and I think that that's a lesson on the dangers of ideology that I sort of tried to inject into the first issue. But what I wanted to get at was the effects of these big ideas clashing on a societal level for the individual, and I hope that comes through.
I mean, it came through in the first issue, so I can't wait for the other 4. And this is just sort of a general question for your writing, because obviously you do have, I say, a pretty good future in comics writing. Is there any genre or maybe even a comics franchise that you would like to pie in the sky, if you could do anything that you would want to work on?
I mean, if you could see, like I said before the stream, if you could see what's on this wall, I would definitely love to write a Star Wars. I do have a couple of ideas for some DC characters, but it's definitely Star Wars for me.
Awesome. Very awesome. I will. Oh, I was
saying I commented on you guys' Star Wars stream that it's interesting that like Star Wars as a like a comics franchise in its own right is like people really care about it now versus like not many people really cared about it when it was sitting at Dark Horse, but like and now it's like huge again. Mm-hmm. And it's like that used to be attainable. Now it's like, very much behind this guy.
Well, it's like,
Tom Taylor got his start on Star Wars comics, so
that's right. Yeah. Well, it's funny when it was at Dark Horse. Yeah, it didn't have. I didn't think it had the reach, but you have people who are like who have an encyclopedia-like knowledge of the Dark Horse universe of titles and like all of the characters and everything.
Particularly Legacy, it seems. Legacy seems to be the one that is the most missed, I think. But also, as you said, David, if you look through some of those Dark Horse series, there's names both on a writer and artist level that you never see again. But I don't know. With what you provided with Nottingham, I wouldn't count you out at all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Wow.
Steve, you still got Brian, the baton. Do you want to hand it over to Brian?
I'm gonna hand it off. I'm gonna say Brian or Bill if you want to.
I would love to know what David is reading currently of comics. I know you like Tom King, and you said Tom King or Tom Taylor. Which one was your
King?
Tom King. Good. We're on the same wavelength. Yeah. What are you? What? Let's say about Tom King with you. Although I feel like we're going to talk about comics too after this. But like, what is it about Tom King's writing that you appreciate? What is it about his style and his influence on you? What about it do you really gravitate towards? Besides the 9-panel and the formalism, like what else?
Like I suppose it's connected to that in that it's there's kind of like a poetic nature to the way he looks at the page as well, and I think that comes back to the formalism thing. So, but I'll move on from that maybe. But I think there's a poetic like pacing to the way you move through those panels that it's harder to find anywhere else. But beyond that, I think that like I gravitate towards like stories that really like make me feel things rather than just dazzle me with action. Like I can put on a Michael Bay movie if I just want lens flares and explosions, but like there's something particularly about Tom King's stuff that makes me feel things.
We're going to talk about him in a little bit when we talk about Batman Catwoman. So I'm glad you're here for us to talk Tom King.
But I made the terrible mistake of not having read issue 2 of Batcat yet. But that's fine. Like, spoil whatever. I'm not.
It will be a treat for you, but we will talk about the first issue. We talked about the first issue before, but I'm sure it'll come back around. But either way, and Steve and Bill love Tom King too. I'm not saying that I am the Tom King fanboy here. Yeah,
we do.
I mean, I really enjoy his style as well. So I'm glad we have a common sympathy. So yeah, I don't know. Like, what else are you? You can't announce any other projects. I get that. But like, what else are you like? I mean, you talk about Star Wars you want to tackle someday. You've got other projects, whatever. What else are you excited about right now in terms of storytelling, either in comics or traditional fiction, if that's still a thing you're interested? I mean, where do you see your energy going in the near term?
Hopefully more comics for now. What I will say is, as the person that has the like million half-finished novels sitting on his hard drive, there's something like to be said for the accessibility and the immediacy of like writing comics. I say this having started writing Nottingham in like October 2019. Wow. But that being said, I think there's something about a 22-page script that just and the immediacy of it, and like being able to like cram three acts into 22 pages every single time, that just kind of works for my brain, that in a way that prose kind of hasn't quite worked yet. And as soon as I discovered that, I spent a lot of time writing scripts before I ever really got I spent a good few months just sitting there writing scripts that will never see the light of day, including a drag book, which I wished would, but
whoa, wait a minute. You wrote a drag
You got the open mouth pittered. Okay, here you go.
Wait,
I will share some stuff with you privately.
Okay.
but like there's like just there was something that like captured my brain about comics, and I was just like, I spent months being prolific trying to like make myself good at this. And it's nice to feel in part that I've succeeded, but like, of course, I have this like writer brain thing being like, I wrote this in 2019 and it's now 2021, and I'm looking back on it going, I could have improved this in this way and this way and this. But yeah, hopefully more to come. What I can say is that today I just got some concepts and some layouts on a anthology story from an Australian publisher that should be coming in the next year or so. That's an 8-pager from me, and then I'm aiming for a Kickstarter at the end of the year. Once all this Nottingham stuff is over, I'm aiming for a Kickstarter thing at the end of the year, which hopefully should surprise people in a different way.
Oh, I love a tease. I'm excited for all of what you just said. All right, Bill, back to you.
Okay, well, one short story that there's no embargo on is one that you have on your website, which is Love Harder. And why don't you give a little bit of a description on that?
I wrote this in about so it was for a short comics competition that kind of we never got any purchase on that, but I wrote this in about 4 hours, and originally my artist dropped out, so I thought, I'll just give it a miss. And then I had a friend of mine, J. Paul Sheik, who, if you look on his Twitter at Sheikopedia, he shares my 9-panel grid obsession, and he offered to do it the night before it was due. So here's me like hurriedly writing it. He churned out 4 pages, 9-panel grids in about 8 hours, and they look very good and like very, very good for 8 hours worth of drawing. And I wanted to write a story about it was kind of like a brain dump of how I felt about the bury your gaze trope.
Okay. Well, one thing I always have to say, of all the things you've said while the show has been in progress, the thing that is knocking me out is that your trip to comics is a fairly recent one. I would have put money on you being a fan of the form for at least 15 years. So whatever you've done in that 2.5 years, that's like getting a master's in, and starting at pre-K. So I'll tell you, I think of all the things you've said, that really blows my mind, because you have such a nice handle on everything, and it's really impressive.
It's mostly owed to my obsessive personality, in that when I like something, I will just fill my life with it. So
yeah. Okay, well, again, Nottingham #1 is in previews here on page 289. And if you want some more information about it, you can go to the specific Nottingham portal that's on the madcavestudios.com website. And very happy that you're going to be sticking around to talk about some current comics and some other stuff. So all the serious best of luck with Nottingham #1.
Thank you very much.
Also, Love Harder, if it's a PDF, you can go to davidhazan.com and download it. And more information how to get all your socials are there, right? So down there.
Yeah, mostly on Twitter. If people want to find me, I'm sure you've linked my Facebook, but Twitter is the way to find me for comic stuff. Okay. Because if you don't exist on Twitter, you don't exist in comics. That's been my experience, unfortunately.
It's such a mess.
Yeah. I don't exist.
I did just tweet though, so you have at least one tweet from us, from me, with the YouTube video. So hopefully our fans can find that. We'll make sure they get that.
Okay, well, as we go on, the first thing I'd like to do is have our Joan Rivers "What Are You Wearing" moment. So we'll start with Steve as usual, and I'll pick people as we go along. So Steve, what have you got on?
Well, this is a shirt that I haven't worn in a very long while, but I love it massively. It is the Peanuts gang as Scooby-Doo, and the gang with the Mystery Machine painted on Scooby's, or not Scooby, Snoopy, Scooby-Doo / Snoopy, as his doghouse. I just thought it was very cute.
Okay, and Brian, how about you?
So I am wearing my very comfortable Moog Fest shirt.
All right.
I think this was from like 2016, maybe 2015. I don't remember. It's really comfortable. It's like the nice jersey, linen feel. Oh.
Is Moog Fest going to be back in 2021, or are they? aiming for 2022.
They were falling apart in 2019 when I went last, or 2018.
Yeah.
So long story short, they canceled 2019, I believe. 2020 came around, and that wasn't going to happen. Like, it's just falling apart. So the pandemic is probably the best thing for them.
Yeah.
I hope and pray that they get their shit together and do like a virtual 2021 thing. I think that would be really good, and then maybe build out into a new one. But.
Yeah. I just got the Moog documentary. I haven't watched it yet.
It's out. Oh my god! I was a Kickstarter patron, whatever the hell thing they did. I didn't even know it was out.
Yeah, it's out. Yeah, so
all right.
There you go. And David, how about you?
I am in a nod to my personal corporate overlords. I am wearing the Mad Cave Studios Showcase 2.0 shirt.
All right.
Nice.
I have a Most Wanted shirt with Lex and Captain Cold and Joker and Ares up there and Sinestro. Talking earlier this week with Craig Lance, I know Steve, you were on that thread about the late lamented Smuggler's Bounty and Legion of Collectors Funko boxes, and this was one of the shirts that was in them. So
nice.
That's what I wore.
Nice.
And just something I wanted to cover, and this is like one of those things like, oh man, like time marches on, and we've been at this a while. April will be, I think, the 9th year we've been doing this. And it was April of 2012, I think was the first show. I'll double check, but I think that's what. But as time has gone on, you know, we've had a number of guests, and unfortunately somebody that we had as a guest twice on the show, artist Steve Lytle, passed away from COVID. And just wanted to offer our deepest sympathies to his wife Marianne and his family. If you're unaware of his work in the 80s into the 90s, and just touching on the 2000s, there was a substantial amount of output, you know, with his runs on Legion of Superheroes and Doom Patrol, and then later as a cover artist for X-Men and for The Flash. And fuck COVID.
Yeah, and actually, for people who know, who've seen the episodes where we've talked about sort of like what inspired us to get into comics and what really drew us into comics, I believe it's the issue number 30 of Classic X-Men, cover drawn by Steve Lytle. That was my first ever X-Men comic that I picked off the shelf just because it was fantastic and I was immediately drawn to it. So, you know, Steve Lytle has a very and his work has a sort of a very emotional impact to me, because it really was one of the reasons why I got so into comics and just fell in love with the medium. So, it's definitely going to be missed.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to some current comics. I don't think there's too much news to cover. We haven't had too much. They had the first episode of Batwoman with the recast, and that was a big thumbs up for me. Yeah. But maybe we can cover that in a little more detail on a TV oriented episode later on.
Don't get me talking about it. Do not.
We have to talk WandaVision at some point, but maybe when it's a little further into the series.
Yeah, let's get a little further in.
WandaVision, the upcoming Superman and Lois, which has now been announced to have,
and the preview was really good. I thought that was released today. Yeah, that wasn't what I was. The tone just wasn't what I was expecting, and it sounds like they're going through some shit. And I think challenges like they presented are fairly interesting. Let's not even talk Heroes Reborn, because I got into a fight. So
it was not a fight. You were having
I was getting close. I was getting close to that. I hate preconceptions. I just hate that. I just hate that. If you have something where there's some meat on the announcement, that's okay. But when you just have a logo, don't lose your shit. But Anyway, he'll hear that, but we love him.
Well, and of course, the people involved in this document did agree, in my head anyway, to a bout of Turkish wrestling to settle the score. So I expect some.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Some tight pants and some baby oil to be.
I'm not doing
liberally applied.
These are the conversations that I miss completely because I never check Facebook.
You have to check, Brian. I know that you speed. Sometimes I'll see like all of a sudden like the Brian balloon will be like whoop.
Yep.
I'm in front of my computer, so I actually want to bother to respond because usually I'm on my phone and I'm like, oh, I can't. But yeah, I missed some gold clearly. So I did want to throw out there, John Runyon, Bill, that shirt rocks my world. All hail the bad guys.
Okay, there you go, John.
I gotta say that when you become a creator, pretending like you're above the nerd rage disagreements is one of the greatest blessings. Because I look at it, I see it, I nod, I accept it, and then I close the window.
Yep.
Okay, well, if we're going to go on to current comic books, we're nothing if not gracious to our guests. So let's start with you, David. David, what's something that you're reading that you're currently digging?
Okay, I just reread Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, which is Kieran Gillen and Caspar Weingart doing their take on Watchmen and why formalism is silly, which I love being made fun of and being gratified at the exact same time. And I think that the last page of the last issue of that book is probably the best last page of a comic I've ever seen. So that.
What made you decide to go over to Thunderbolt? I'm just interested as somebody who's older and has a different conception of the original take on the character.
I think it was pretty much Gillen and Weingart doing anything great. And also, I found out that it makes fun of the things that I love about comics. And I was like, all right, if you can't take a joke that's about you, then what are you doing? Making comics in the first place.
So when you mentioned that you were reading this, I pulled out my issues that haven't gone into the bunker yet. And
I'm a digital boy myself.
Okay, so with this, apart from Watchmen, this also came out. I don't want to say concurrently because of the delays, but this was happening as Doomsday Clock was happening. So there is some wonderfully meta things going on in the story. And just for people who are unaware about the character, this is basically for all intents and purposes, the influence for Ozymandias. And beyond that, we're at a point where we're starting to get more, whether it be in podcast form or in comic form or TV, we're getting more and more biographical, Jesus, that's not even a word, biography projects about comic creators. And the comic creator of Thunderbolt, Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, was a gentleman named, and he actually wrote and drew the stories, was a gentleman named Pete Morisi. And comic books weren't his main source of income. He was actually a New York City transit cop and then later transferred over to a different division of the New York Police Department. So the work appeared under the name PAM, PAM, which was his initials, and his backstory is amazing. It crosses into the Son of Sam. It's a hell of a story, and I hope at some point that's documented in something a little more interesting than a few pages in Back Issue magazine. That's something I'd love to see. But I'm with you there, David. I just thought it was a really, really powerful take on some things when it gets to formalism that I think we take for granted, or just accept. And I agree with you. At the end of that series, after they are, after he returns, let's just put it that way, that it was a very, very, very strong ending.
And also, it's just like randomly and beautifully and charmingly queer at the end, and that also, that also made me a little happy.
I also liked that they, just for some backstory on the character itself, when DC took over a bundle of the Charlton characters, they were basically as an affair. It's coming through. Yeah. Bliss. Anyway, basically when DC took over for a bundle of the Charlton characters, those included at the time Thunderbolt, and because of U.S. copyright laws, Pete Morisi was actually able to wrestle back the rights to this character. So this is one of the few instances where DC actually lost a character that was in their canon, and it actually came about that before Jakeem Thunder was supposed to happen, they were supposed to, the JSA's Johnny Thunder and Thunderbolt were supposed to have some kind of connection with this character, and then that got scuppered because because of the rights reverting to the creator. So some interesting stuff there. And there actually were some references to things like the previous Dynamite series that Alex Ross had co-written, which if you ever see, has these beautiful covers by Jay Lee. No, I was very happy with the reread today.
And like the idea that like Watchmen was ostensibly going to be using the Charlton Comics characters and then didn't. It's just like 3 levels of meta text that I just loved.
Brian, Steve, I know I covered the first issue. Have either of you read this? No.
It looks great though. I just was flipping through the preview stuff online, and I gotta get this. I love Kieran's stuff too.
Yeah, and again, there's also queer content within the storyline, and that reveal is a bit of a surprise if you're used to what came before. Yeah, definitely a big recommendation there. All right, Stevie, tell me about something you're reading that you're digging.
Well, talking about queer content, I am a big Kickstarter fan, and queer comics have really, I think, had such a great presence over the past several years on Kickstarters, and it's a great way to get to get a book out there in a way that you may not be able to with a traditional publisher. And especially with queer comics, there's sometimes it's difficult to find a publisher locally, or a publisher that has the time or money or ability to really market something that you want to produce. Obviously, Northwest Press, we love you, and sometimes that type of avenue isn't really open for a lot of people if you don't know it's out there, or if you don't have the ability to get it there. But lately, I've had some really great Kickstarted books that I've been reading, and one of them that just came this past week was Fanny Galactic, Tuck to the Future, which is a fun, great book by Chris Fildes on writing duties, and Edward Bentley for art and colors. And it is just a fun, fluffy, just really fun concept of a drag queen who's kind of a little older. We're talking almost Lady Bunny age, for those familiar with her, who is kind of over it all, and the scene's really boring for her, but something happens and she gets blasted to the future, a future that's been taken over, an England that's been completely taken over by an evil drag queen and her army of drag bots. And there's some just wonderful imagery here where You have robots that have gay bars. You have the Queen of England being ridden out of town by scary drag queens on bikes. You've got just all sorts of wonderful little images that are thrown in there, and a very bizarre cast of characters. But all through it, Fanny Galactic sort of has this sense of humor and this sense of tongue-in-cheek sort of self-awareness that is goofy. The art is a lot of fun. And the way that characters are played with, you have some very interesting imagery here. Put that up there. That is just it's unexpected, and every part of this book is just very bizarre. It also has some interesting cameos. Panty Bliss, famous Irish drag queen, does make a brief appearance. As she goes red-eyed and starts slaughtering patrons, which, of course, drag queens really want to do, but don't usually get a chance to do. But it's just it's a lot of fun. It's a quick read if anybody wants it. But Hey Dorothy Comics was able to publish this and put this out with the Kickstarter, and I'm sure it'll be available for you from their website and in future printings as well if you're interested in picking it up. Fanny Galactic took to the future, and there will be a sequel. A sequel is planned.
Okay. And then I guess we should move over to Brian. Brian, what's something you're reading that you're digging?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, Bat and Cat, or Batman and Catwoman #2 came out, and I was the one who completely missed when the first issue came out, so I got to read that, which was delightful. And again, I won't spoil too much because I know our dear guest David and Bill. Have you read this yet? I don't think it's come in your DCBS yet.
Yeah, no, it's not yet.
So,
Xbox.
Steve, are you reading? You typically don't read these?
No, I am getting the issues, but again, DCBS box, and I am so far behind on my DC books.
Let me show you. I'm not going to show you a lot because, again, I don't want to spoil this for our or anyone. But what I realized, and I missed this the first issue, and it took that second one to really sink in. This is an advent calendar. Totally missed that. Didn't realize. Each issue is like a little window in the place. They have numbers above them if you pay attention, which I don't always, I admit. So yeah, first one was Silent Night. That's way over here. And then the second one is Up on the Housetop. So that's cool. I didn't know that he was doing that little idea. It picks right up where the last issue left off, which is basically multiple timelines. I believe 2 principally set where in one timeline, Batman and Catwoman are, pretty much where we left them when Tom King finished his run. They're together having wacky adventures, doing their thing. But in the other timeline, probably the more predominant one, it's based on that annual, what was it called? Winter's End, I believe. Or
the Batman Annual 2?
Yes, the Batman Annual #2.
Yeah, it's winter. Something like that.
So that was Tom King's sort of coda to their relationship, and it's this isn't a spoiler as much. It's set basically after Batman dies. So you have Selena Kyle, older, retired, off having sort of her post Batman adventure, and she goes, and again, this is in the first issue, which we've already talked about. She goes to see the Joker. And the Joker is retired, living in Florida in a very, unfortunately, stereotypical kind of way. As a Floridian, I feel it was a little... but she basically, in the first issue, is like, I'm going to kill you because of what happened. And part of the what happened is what we're finding out in the more contemporaneous storyline. That involves the Phantasm, right, from that first Batman the animated series movie. This issue plays out in a way that I was sort of surprised by. Certainly things unfold that are, so Selena's in a complicated place because she no longer has Batman or Bruce to anchor her and kind of maybe keep her better angels in charge, her demons at bay. So, you get to see a little bit of that in this, like, retired sort of scenario, but you also get to see sort of the constant sort of moral gray area that she dances around. And there is a thing that's happened that she doesn't really want Batman or Bruce to know. And I basically flat up lies about it and is trying to keep this from him. And again, involves the Phantasm in both the original and sort of this maybe legacy version. The art by Clay Mann, actually drawing the Phantasm. I want to show you that too, because I don't think that's a spoiler very much. Excellent. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. This is the first time this has happened. Like, the Phantasm was not in the comics. It was invented for the series. And this is the first appearance?
Sort of, kind of. There was a Titans character named Phantasm that shares some of the visual elements, but and that's why Marv Wolfman has a creator credit for Phantasm. But the Phantasm that was part of the movie, apart from I think one issue somewhere in the the comics that were directly based on the TV series, hasn't appeared.
Okay, so I mean, it's interesting to me, and I've only seen the animated series movie a long time ago, so I very vaguely remember much about it. Though that was another piece of news. We all saw the headline about they're going to bring back the Batman the Animated Series on HBO Max in some form. We're not sure, I think. Exactly. So that's cool. But yeah, no, it's great, Tom King. Does it push the genre in ways like Rorschach and maybe even Strange Adventures did or is doing? I mean, not yet. But I am very much enjoying sort of this very Catwoman focused. It's really and we talked about this. It's really Catwoman and Batman. But I always thought that it was interesting the way he told that coda and sort of the way he saw the relationship playing out. So far in the second issue, there's another panel I got to show you. Clay Mann is just, I mean, he's a beast. I regret not talking to him more when I had, because he came to our comic shop and he was at MegaCon a lot. Like, he always seemed kind of weird to me, a little like bro-y. I didn't resonate with that. But he was super nice, and I've actually talked to several of his collaborators about him, and it was it was an early days for him too. He was an artist alley at that point. But I mean, seriously, some really cool stuff going on. Reminds me, who was the one that did Final Crisis? J.G. Jones, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of has some things that remind me of his style, particularly in the way the clothes kind of fit and look. It feels very like the materials look very lived in and correct, So yeah, I'm very much enjoying it, and I really enjoy the fact that this is, even though it's a little weird because it's after Christmas. I like that it's a Christmas sort of tale in a lot of ways, because now we get to have Christmas all year long as this unfolds. So yeah, David, what did you think, since you're here? What did you think of the first issue? We didn't have you on when that came out. What were your thoughts on this series?
So, having only read the first issue, I was intrigued, but it's kind of parallels my feelings on WandaVision and first issues generally, in that I don't think comics are a medium where you can just sit on inviting someone into the world. I think you have to really hook them. And I of course I'm gonna read the rest of it because I'm a mark, but but I definitely felt like I needed more of the mystery. To me, it's totally fine if you leave someone with answers, at least someone with questions, but you have to give them answers that make more questions. To me, that's what makes a good first issue. And I think because we had 2 or 3 different time periods that we were in, there's only so many pages that there's only so much you can put in a first issue. I think maybe they might have benefited from like making it a double-sized one, but I'll have to read issue 2 to.
I was honestly, as you were talking, I was like, no, they should have done this as a double, 2 issues in one. Though I will say that even though it does address some of the setup, I don't know that it asks so many more questions. It's like, I don't remember it leaving me on like what happens next, which is really what you're saying. You really want that pull into the next issue so people don't drop off. So I think Tom King, sometimes his style and his complexity works against itself for this medium. If you read this as a one, like we've talked about this, there are writers that, work better in trade, right? And I think Tom King, even though I enjoyed episodically, I am in, like you said, I'm a mark. So I'm not going to not read it. But for people who may not know what his style is or be interested in it at first, you really do need to get a couple issues to catch the hook. So, I'm excited for the rest of you guys to read this. And now that I know it's out, I'll try to remember. I actually did want to make a correction too. A while back talked, I think it may have even been only a month ago, Green Lantern, the Morrison series.
That it wasn't the last issue.
It's totally not over. Which makes so much more sense the way that last issue ended that I talked about. I was on the Comixology app today and I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute. I have not read that. And so thankfully we're going to get at least another, there's another four issues.
Yeah, it goes to 12. Yep.
So I'm great. I wanted to point that out. I wanted to be transparent about my idiocy, but I'm excited now because I feel like Morrison, just from what I saw, the covers of the next couple issues or the current ones that are out, it looks like quite a Morrison-y ride. So I'm very excited. So. Yeah.
All right.
Morrison-y ride. I think that needs to be used more often. It's a Morrison-y ride.
I apologize for the shuffling while that was going on, but I thought I might be able to locate the Mask of the Phantasm soundtrack that I have on CD. The end song by Tia Carrere is a guilty pleasure.
Oh, God.
Does anyone remember this song? I never even told you. I thought you knew. No. All right. Anyway,
I haven't seen the movie since it first came out. I think that was 95, 90.
Earlier than that, because I was dating a girl when it came out, and it had to have been before 95.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the Mask of the Phantasm, I mean, that was kind of a high point for the Batman animated series, the fact that it got a film, and it did have a theatrical release, and it was in constant rotation in our VCR because my brothers loved it, and we're constantly
Did you have it in the clamshell?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did too. Yeah.
Yep. So we actually do have a couple comments specific to the Phantasm as a character. James Figueredo says the Phantasm is kind of based on the Reaper from Batman Year 2.
There's some of it, but there's also, keep in mind, when the New Titans run happened, one of the characters was Phantasm, which is the souls of two different characters. It's convoluted.
Oh,
yeah, of Arella and Danny Chase, and I remember my Titans, baby, and again, that's why Marv Wolfman has a co-creator credit. So, and it's actually a little more traditional with the mask and the cape with the tears in it and shit. But in terms of the vibe, I can definitely see what James is talking about with the Reaper from Batman Year 2.
And John Runyon says the rendition of Batman of Phantasm is epic. Holy smokes! I may have to pick up the second issue. So there we go.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I'll move on to my choice, and I know I've been a little bit DC heavy because of the binges, but I went to another universe, and I seem to have been talking a lot about this because I did handle the Black Hammer binge, and then the Skulldigger, and Skull, whatever the fuck that is. I can't remember the name. Skulldigger and Skullboy, is that what it is?
Skulldigger and Skeleton Boy.
Skeleton Boy, okay. And there's a new issue of that. I just got a new issue of that.
Yeah, the final issue, I think, right?
Yeah,
Is this
well,
the
I
final
got
issue?
5 because I didn't order it from DCBS, so I
Okay.
actually walked into a store to get it. But taking my life in my hands for the Black Hammer universe. But this is another book from the world of Black Hammer. There's been 3 issues published. There's another one coming at the end of the month, and this is Colonel Weird Cosmagog, written by the main Black Hammer creator and scribe Jeff Lemire, with art by Tyler Crook. My only exposure to Tyler Crook was a few issues of Harrow County. I know he's done a lot with the Hellboy universe and like some Six Gun fill-ins, things like that.
Yep.
So this really was like my first extended exposure to his work. And what Colonel Weird is to the universe is he's basically their Adam Strange, Captain Comet kind of analog. There's elements of Green Lantern in there. There's elements certainly of Silver Surfer in there, but he's like the spacefaring hero. He's also the time-faring hero, and he fucked time up. So when he ventured into what was called the Parazone, he basically lives and operates at various different times at once. And he's central for the warning when the anti-god appears in the main event that sent the Black Hammer crew to the farm. Just accept that. You can Google the rest. And how he's been in Black Hammer is basically as a supporting character. He's not one of the main characters. It was really interesting in this that in what is the most schizophrenic and jumbled character, you have the most heart-wrenching story so far. Due to his scientific inquiries, his former love interest, and this is not a spoiler, it's like set forth, I think, very early on in the Black Hammer story that because of his machinations, the love of his life was basically ripped apart. And what we have in Cosmagog is the character operating at various different times. Again, this is central to the character's storyline. What happens when they meet up? And you have the version of him in 1946 as a child. You have the version of him in the 1950s as the basic, as I said before, Flash Gordon-ish space-faring hero. You have him in the late 60s as somebody who's effectively leading a cult. You have him in the 70s where he befriends a homeless dude. And no one else he encounters believes him about his stories, and they do meet up. The art is just so beautiful, and this is like totally Tyler Crook. He does the pencils, the inks, the watercolors, and the lettering. Everything is him, and particularly with the scenes that take place when he is a child in 1946. Those are the really gut-wrenching ones about somebody who is different. Literally, his last name is Weird. He's a weird kid, and the influences of bullying and being made to feel that you're something less than you are trailing this guy throughout all of his existences. And like I said, I was not expecting for that gut-wrenching a story, from what is the most schizophrenic character in the universe. Also, I would say if anyone really dug Peter Milligan's Shade the Changing Man, it's a very short jump from the Parazone to the Area of Madness. And I think you really would enjoy this if that was one of your favorite Vertigo series of the 90s. So one more issue coming out, but I have the first 3, and that's Colonel Weird Cosmagog.
I'm reading this book too, and it's really great. And I think another parallel character that Lemire's kind of modeled Colonel Weird after is Dr. Manhattan. There's very much, yes,
I wasn't
very
getting that
much,
at all.
not in the,
Yeah, I
not
have
in
to say I
the
wasn't
I
getting
am,
that at all because I just don't see the creation element central
it,
to the
he
character.
doesn't, well, creation element could very well be there, because Colonel Weird, he even says it himself that it is his fault everything fell into place the way it is. By entering into the Parazone, he essentially is given all the powers and omnipresence of a god, but without the way to understand it. And when we talk about sort of Dr. Manhattan, one of the things that is very big in Alan Moore's writing, and of course everybody who's written after him, is that he exists in all time periods at the same time. So everything that he's experiencing is based on the fact that he is experiencing it as a complete, like at the time that it's being experienced, he's always experiencing it. It's always happened. It always will happen. He is always happening. Colonel Weird is essentially the same way. He's experiencing everything in his life constantly at all time periods. And that's why he's so confused constantly. He has no idea when he is or where he is, if he's actually experiencing something or if it's just a memory. And his memories are real. So when he's a child being bullied, being beaten up, he's always a child being bullied and beaten up. He's always in that rocket ship as the Tom Corbett space cadet, experiencing the Parazone for the first time. And it's very interesting sort of seeing it from this character's perspective, because in this book, there's something he's forgotten. And essentially, if he can remember what it is, because again, he remembers, he is his memory. Like, he is happening at the same time. Anything that has happened to him is still happening to him. If he can remember what it is that he forgot, he might be able to change reality again in a way that can save reality. And if you've been reading any of the other Black Hammer books and anything else in the Black Hammer universe, there is that very central story of the Black Hammer crew, that they can't be in the normal reality without triggering anti-god. So anti-god will always happen because the Black Hammer crew is there in reality. So they have to be out of reality, but there has to be a way, obviously, to stop it so that they don't, they're not permanently having to be taken out. And I think that that's what this series might be able to do. Now, whether it gets resolved in the next issue or not, I mean, that's a good question, because there's definitely so much more that Lemire has planned for all of this. So, I mean, we've got Barbalian that's ongoing as well. I think it has a couple more issues. And I know there's some more books that are coming up.
Yeah, sometime in 2021, there's the Teen Titans-ish team has a series coming up. I do buy your Dr. Manhattan analog a bit more from your description. I just always ascribe so much weight to Manhattan as instigator and not bystander, and that's probably why I didn't come into this. Now that you were talking about this, another character that I think there's some definite crossover with is Pariah from Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yeah, I definitely can, and especially since the anti-god is their crisis event. I think that there's some validity there too.
Well, we've already seen him go through different realities, like when he ended up in the reality of forgotten comics characters. That he ended up there in that plane of existence. But it was always as something where he was detached from the actual reality. But once he's back in the reality of the Black Hammer universe, he's stuck in this endless loop.
Yeah.
Always.
I also did feel, and again, there's whatever how much ground covers in issue 4, which is the last issue, it's going to be a lot of ground.
It better be a lot.
Yeah. But I was wondering if you felt this way as well, Steve, because again, the tie-in limited series have been ancillary stories. Of all of them, I have a feeling that this one is going to have the most amount of gravity and the most influence on the main story. Did you get that feeling as well? Like potentially that this could be like a major part of the storyline. Yeah.
I mean, this could be their essentially a reboot. Maybe not a reboot, maybe that's the wrong word, but a way to sort of like re-kickstart the main reality, because all the other ancillary books are all, either in the time before Anti-God happened, right immediately after Anti-God, so the Black Hammer crew are gone, or the only other one, Quantum Age, that takes place in the far future, and who's at the end of time, but Colonel Weird.
Yeah.
Who's always been there. And so there's a lot of I think there might be something at the end of this where Jeff Lemire can do like the, oh my god, mind blown, everything comes down to this kind of thing, and let's change this bit of reality. And I think maybe, it might have something to do with his lost girlfriend.
Yeah. David, have you been reading anything Black Hammer?
I have not. It is like one of the things that's next on my list, mostly because like it just looks super interesting. Like I tend to be very wary of like non-Marvel and DC superhero universes. Sorry to poke at you, Steve, but like in particular, the king of Valiant Comics.
I know. And the one thing too with Black Hammer, and I don't know if Astro City is on your list as well. The Astro City line of comics by Kurt Busiek. There is this. I want to say it's like a genre of comics that take DC and Marvel characters and reimagine them in a very different way. From a very different perspective. And I think that, Astro City, Black Hammer especially, his Lemire like basically takes, here's this character and this is what I'm calling him here, and I think also Supreme was another one that Alan Moore, once Alan Moore I think took over it, I think it really took on more of that kind of life of rather than just a copycat, sort of a commentary.
I have described Black Hammer in the past. I have described Black Hammer as Astro City on crystal meth. Yeah, and I still think it's a very valid. Going to the other gentleman on our screen, Brian, have you sampled anything Black Hammer yet?
I actually read the first trade of the Black Hammer series and was very interested and enjoyed it. But it's another one of those things, kind of like David said, where I've read Astro City. I've certainly, here and there, but nothing like pushes me to go back to it. It captures my attention at the time. And this is not a commentary on the work, because I think the work is actually really good. But I think it's one of those things where if I'm going to read superhero comics, I think Marvel and DC are just so present for me. It just ropes me in. Whereas, otherwise I don't want to read about superheroes. I want to read about whatever else in other comics. So it's a weird psychological game, but it's on my list. I do intend to read it in its totality eventually. When it's
again, there's only so many minutes and hours in the day. And it took me a long time to read this. It took me a long time to get started, but then I mainlined it.
Lemire's indie comics are amazing though. So if you're similar to me and you kind of go, I'm good with superheroes, any of Lemire's indie stuff, Sweet Tooth, of course. What's the
Underwater Welder?
Underwater Welder is the first one I read, but what's the one that it's like something county?
Essex County.
Essex County. I thoroughly love that book. It is so cool. It all fits together in an interesting way. I can't recommend his indie stuff enough.
The one thing I have to say about Essex County is I have it digitally, and that's one book I really wish I had the textural feel of turning pages.
Yeah.
When I reread it, I want to reread it in a physical form, because as much as I enjoyed it digitally, I think there would have been just a different aesthetic to reading it in that form.
Yeah.
So I'm jealous of people who did that, because
David, what were you going to say?
I did pick up the first 3 issues of Barbalian. I haven't read them yet, but I am very excited to read them.
I'd be interested in what you feel about it, what you think about Barbarian, because it really, this is one of those books where if you've been reading all the rest of the Black Hammer books, you've already become very familiar with this character. And this is, just a period in his life. So, but there's a lot more in this that you don't necessarily get in the previous stuff. So it's really cool.
Yeah. I was a huge fan of Steve Orlando's Martian Manhunter series. So I'm very excited for this.
Really, Rossimo.
Just those pages, it's like galaxy brain,
There's like, I gotta say, there's like Riley Rossimo stuff every month. Do you notice that? Whether it's in the anthology series, or I think he's on one of the Future State books. It seems like he's worked every month.
Yeah, pretty steady.
And it's such a distinctive style. I think he's Legion. I think that's what the Future State he is.
No, Harley Quinn, I think.
Oh. Harley Quinn?
Yeah. Ooh.
Okay. Well, for some reason,
interesting.
So we have a couple shout outs here I have to throw in.
Sure.
Our friend of the show, Stony Williams.
Yep.
Holy crap! Is that the David Hazan?
Love you, Stony Williams.
If you want to
American
see
sweetheart Stony Williams,
our interview with Stony, you can go back a few videos. I'll try to put a link on the video to that interview. It was great about Villainous, which is number 4 is out at the end of January.
And I swear Villainous is in this pile here.
I have read the end.
Ooh,
oh, cool.
We got one more follow on. Oh, just some hearts. I love it. And then our buddy James, going on a tangent. Not that we ever need that, but we're happy to entertain them. Bill mentioned the Titans Phantasm. How is it that Titans Hunt has never been collected? That seems like a huge gap in the Titans library.
I do agree, and I do think it's a shame that a lot of Tom Grummett stuff hasn't been collected from that era of Titans, because Tom Grummett was a very good artist. He is. I mean, he's not dead. And I think some of it was the length, because I do think Titans Hunt in its total is like about 15 issues. And when it does come to this stuff, I also do think the economics come in, because these are issues that are fairly cheap to come by. We naturally are getting the thing that always drove me nuts. Do you remember when the trade paperback for Prodigal, which was the first time that Dick Grayson was Batman, and that was like a $250 book, but you could find the single issues in 50-cent bins. I do think that some of it is an economic decision. Just because the single issues are so easily available for cheap. But I agree with him. I would love to see that collected. I'd love to see a consistent reissue program of what happened after Perez left. Because there's some interesting stuff there. Some of it's garbage, but Titans Hunt was a game changer for that particular team, and I agree. I would like to see some of that collected, even if I didn't buy it myself.
We've got this is actually going back several comments from earlier in the show. David, you had mentioned that as a fellow creator now, as where you've got colleagues and there's arguments happening about decisions or storylines or announcements and whatnot. Matt Brossard, creators get issued an official Nerd Rage poker to slate the
Look, I've seen it happen on Twitter. It happens about every second week. Someone does something that's just like, I'm like very emotionally and intellectually disinterested in all of that. You'll see, and like I don't always see what has sparked the fires of rage that kind of spread throughout in like very vague tweets and subtweets. So I just see them and I'm just comfortable with maybe not.
Maybe I won't like that one tweet because that could get me in trouble for liking it. So just read it and move on.
Okay, on the surprisingly controversial Eastern Standard Time that I'm on, we are at 11:04. So this is usually the point where we start wrapping things up. And when we do wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears podcast up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar here, where we spotlight something which may be a comic book, but it also may be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. Again, being gracious to our guests, we'll start with David. David, what is your Wolf of the Week?
Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly, because it's kind of vague without like a proper. So I'm gonna send Brian what I intended to do here. I'm just gonna, but what I'm intending to shout out is my buddy Christoph Borgart's series from Scout Comics called Volume, which is coming this year at some point. And it's gorgeous. It's just stunning. I don't know how much I can and am allowed to give away, so I've sent through the link to make that easier for you.
All right.
Hold on, I'm working on that.
I just sent it through on the Facebook. I'm sorry, I was like very slow on the uptake there. You should pick me.
I got you. Here we go. All right, this is what we're looking at. Ooh. There's more to the art. No, just that.
Teenage Rebellion and superpowered punks, of course.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Oh, that's so cool.
It's very intriguing.
I like it.
Yeah.
Look, I'm starting to read and then Brian moves it. Okay.
Sorry.
All right, we'll move on to Steve. Steve, what is your Wolf of the Week?
So my Wolf of the Week is something that I have not yet seen. But after watching the preview and reading as many articles as I possibly could on it, I am now so jonesing to watch it. Once I have a chance to watch it, I will definitely watch it and then report back whether my excitement for it was justified or not. There is a place, David, in the United States, in Brian's home state of Florida, called The Villages. And it is a very bizarre manufactured community for retired people. So everyone there is over the age of 55. I don't believe there are any children at all that live in this series. And it's basically this large community that's about 50-some thousand people large. And it touches on a couple different municipalities, but it is sort of its own entity. And it's just a giant retirement community. A 23-year-old film student from the University of Florida decided to go to the Villages, not knowing anyone, and make a documentary. He didn't know what he was going to make it on. It was just going to be a documentary about life in the Villages. And while there, he ended up befriending several people whose lives do not fit very well with the Villages community. There's this outward image of the Villages that is very bizarre. Elderly people basically living their best life if it were still the 60s and they were in their 20s. Like, that's exactly kind of like what this world is. There's a ton of sex. There are no cars. You have to use I guess golf carts to get around in a lot of these places. And you just have basically elderly people acting like they're in their 20s. They're the koalas of the United States, so chlamydia is extremely prevalent.
Hold on there. Wait a second. We have on this show the Koala of Comics. We do not besmirch the good name of koalas here.
No, you can. That's fine.
Is that what you're called, the Koala of Comics?
No, but that whole thing was a gimmick, which I will explain another time.
You actually do love to live in trees and eat eucalyptus. I have, you are famous for that.
True.
But no, so anyway, this documentary film, he did find some people who don't fit the mold of the Village's people. They're known for being very conservative and like we're super Trump supporters and all of that. These people didn't find the joy in the life of living in the Villages. There's some interesting characters that he discovered just by being there and seeing through the veneer kind of the image that the Villages projects, and not in a way that he's disparaging it. He's just finding people and sharing the stories of people who don't really fit that mold. The movie is called Some Kind of Heaven. It's been released in the US on video on demand. It's available for rental, and soon will be available for purchase.
Do they get into? Oh, sorry. Do they get into what a pool noodle means on your cart?
Oh, I'm sure all of that comes out. There's a lot of interesting things that the documentary can do.
I'm really excited about this only because now it kind of horrifies me that Florida is the shit show that it is, and having lived there for all of my adult life up until the last year, it's weird. But the pool noodle, for those of you who are interested, is a sign that you are swinging. So if you have certain types of pool noodles on your golf cart, that's what that means. My friends,
it's like flagging for old straight people.
It is exactly like flagging handkerchiefs. Oh my God! Thank you, Dave. My friends that are musicians in that area in Central Florida have played gigs at the Villages, and it is they're very much stuck in a certain mentality. At least the types that they know they want to program. And it's all of those bands, the sort of bands that do covers, Beatles through, let's say, the mid 80s, and then it starts to taper off. It's a fascinating ecosystem. So now I am excited to check this out, Steve. Thank you for sharing that.
The director is Lance Oppenheim, and it is his first movie, straight out of film school. His first movie, and it's been getting the accolades left, right, and center. So
honestly, it's funny you said horrifying, because I could have sworn, like, without knowing it was a documentary, that description was going to go directly into like get out for the elderly. That's what I had in my head until you mentioned it was a documentary.
You might not be wrong. I mean, the thing is, like, the Villages is very famous nationally for being just a bizarre. It's a bizarre alternate reality, which is why a lot of them were very famous for being Trump supporters, COVID deniers, even though they were extremely affected by COVID and vulnerable to it. Lots of things. But anyway, I'm taking up too much time.
Now I just know there's going to be Blumhouse, The Villages.
I cannot wait.
Just know it.
That would be very good.
Yeah. That would be No, M. Night Shyamalan remake The Village as The Villages.
Yeah, but isn't there like a cheapness to... we spent too much time on this anyway. All right, so let's go move on to Brian. Brian, what is your wolf of the week?
So I want to talk about some new friends of mine who are a drag duo out of San Francisco. They are called Media Meltdown. And I don't think I mentioned them before, but I found out about them because they used to be an in-person show that they would do. And they would two drag queens, but they would bring in other people, drag performers, I should say. They would do shows in San Francisco, but then the pandemic forced them to go on to Twitch and do virtual drag shows. And oh my God, they have such a huge reach now. They did a Dune themed drag show in November of last year. That was spectacular. They just had their modern art themed drag show on Twitch this past Sunday. We actually had a little sort of kiki happy hour session on one of our Discords for Flame On, and had a lovely time witnessing the idea of drag show about modern art. And I am getting to talk to Piranha and Franzia Kafka, the two queens that run Media Meltdown. I'm getting to talk to them on my Monday Spotlight series on Twitch and on YouTube and whatever for Flame On. So I am very excited. I love them. I think they are kindred souls. They are doing what I think is the future of drag, which is basically drag in a whole other like weird intellectual art thing. So yeah, if you have any time and you want to see any of the stuff they do a weekly like Cinema 420 kind of mystery science theater, but in drag without as much riffing. So they just kind of watch the movie, and there's riffing in the chat. Media Meltdown on Twitch is probably the easiest way to find them. Yeah, you should all check them out. It's spectacular.
At some point we have to have a discussion about why I'm not into drag.
Yeah,
I'm just seeing, because like every time it starts, I lean my head and stuff. And there are some performers that I really enjoy, like Coco Peru, especially.
Yes.
But this is just something, as you guys, I know you guys are, avid Drag Race viewers. Just from somebody who's on the outside, it seems some of the contestants are really shitty people. And on top of that, it does seem that some of the stuff, it seems to me, is almost bordered on minstrelsy, and or like something correlated to that. So
there's a
at some point I'd like to have a long conversation about this, because there may be drag performers that I would be into, but what I'm seeing from that few steps back, there's nothing there that's inviting.
This is why getting away from what is the RuPaul Drag Race is important. Matt Brossard was actually in Little Happy Hour we did, and fully endorses my opinion on this. I think that you, Bill, you would appreciate the theatrical qualities that this group does, and it's more theater, and that's the type of drag that I tend to gravitate to, like the Ben de la Creme, Jinx Monsoon, really out there queens that are doing like vaudeville theater. More that than the other stuff.
Varla Jean Merman.
Varla Jean, absolutely. So yeah, we should have a drag deep dive someday.
Yeah,
I'm happy to,
and I think you really picked on that properly, because some of my early exposure to drag was through the Ridiculous Theater Company, and shows like Brother Truckers and Irma Vep. And I think you just like drilled onto something that I can hang a hat on. So I'm probably definitely going to be tuning in on Monday, because if that's in alignment with stuff that I that or should I say is not in alignment with some of my observations, that may be something I'd be really interested in.
Good.
Stoney actually mentioned something on here. He just commented. My wife and I's first drag was to a drag show, and I've always enjoyed them, but I don't care for Drag Race itself. So I think, Bill, you've got a kindred spirit there with Stoney.
But am I wrong? Are some of these people like really shitty people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just don't want to feel like I'm crazy, but it seems every time I give it a try, it's like I can't spend weeks with this person.
The Drag Race is the extreme of what is otherwise a really interesting art form, and I'm interested in the art form and sort of the future versions of this that aren't Drag Race. But you could also see Drag Race sort of gravitating towards that. You see that with the UK a little bit. Some of the Canada,
so good.
Yeah, they go out beyond the shitty, very reality TV tropes. So yeah, we can talk. There's a whole discussion here.
Okay, cool.
Drag Race UK from tonight, though. Rats the Rusical. Brilliant.
Okay. Brilliant. All right. So my wolf of the week. God, I feel like such an old man doing this, but this was connected to with Christmas gifts. So something I've never read has been the Superman comic strip. That existed from the very late 30s into 1966. IDW over the past few years has been putting out volumes. So through gifts, I now have 7 volumes of this stuff. So I have everything from the Golden Age. They haven't pushed everything out yet from the Atomic Age, but at least I have this nice 1939 to 1949 chunk. And one of the really interesting things about it is it has the same creators as the comic book. The very early strips were written by Jerry Siegel and drawn by Joe Shuster. Then when Wayne Boring takes over in the comics, he also takes over in the comic strip. And in a lot of ways, from what I understand, it's kind of like an alternative history of the character. Lex Luthor's background is slightly different from what we're used to. Mxyzptlk is slightly different. Some of those are to do accommodations in relation to a daily strip. So I'm really interested. This is going to be my big reading thing. These are beautiful volumes, expensive as hell. But now I have everything from the Golden Age. And since Steve repeated his Wolf of the Week from Tuesday, I'm going to repeat my sub-wolf. I got my team in the NFC Championship, so go Pack, go. And I'm just going to leave this on my head for the rest of the show. David, do you have any familiarity with American football?
About zero, other than ogling on occasion. About zero. The television show Blue Mountain State is about it.
Okay,
that's all you need to know. It's exactly like that. Exactly like that.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us, which I hope is the first of many, many appearances with us. We've really enjoyed having you on the live chats during the show, and so happy to have you on here, and really psyched about what's going to happen for you with Nottingham. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Such a pleasure. Seriously.
And again, I do see that Brian put up the website. If you want to reiterate any of your points of contact on the interwebs, you can do so at this point as well.
Oh yeah, it's my Twitter is at David T Hazan, the letter T.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Sure, my Facebook again is linked somewhere, but best place to find me is Twitter.
All right, great.
Cool.
All right, we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter, and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. If you want to listen to us, you can do so by downloading us through iTunes, listening to us through Stitcher Radio, and downloading us from other various podcasting platforms. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would really appreciate that. And as always, with iTunes or with YouTube, please leave a review, especially if you're digging it. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Brian Pittard.
I'm Steve Morey.
If you're listening to the audio version, you're going to hear a woof and an explosion, and we'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye.